Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Recovery Talk. So in this week's episode, I want to talk a bit about advocating for your own needs in recovery. How to communicate your boundaries, what you need to the people around you, and how to do that in a way that doesn't create conflict and resentment. I also want to talk a bit about people pleasing and how this may complicate your ability to communicate your needs, and why people pleasing may actually end up not really pleasing people after all, and what is really behind people pleasing. So let's get started. So one big mistake that I see people make when it comes to wanting to communicate their needs in recovery is that they think that in order for them to, for example, ask for XYZ, or in order for them to do a certain thing in recovery, the people around them need to understand everything as to why they are doing that thing or why they need that thing. For example, maybe you're in recovery and you need to eat more regular meals more frequently throughout the day. Or maybe you need to do more food challenges, or maybe you need to add in more of certain foods than maybe you haven't added in before. And then you feel like in order for you to actually do that, the person, whether that is a family member, parents, siblings, friends, housemates, partners, you name it, they need to understand it. So for example, maybe you are going to the grocery store and you're buying certain foods that you haven't bought before. And you feel like in order for you to do that, you need to make sure that your housemates understand 100% what is going on, and that your housemates doesn't say anything triggering and everything has to be perfect and they need to know everything about recovery. You're kind of setting yourself up to fail here because you're setting a standard that is quite unrealistic. Please don't get me wrong, educating the people around you a little bit about recovery and saying, hey, like this is what's going on with me, that can be very, very helpful, especially if it's someone that you're very close to. So imagine, for example, it's your parents or it is a significant other. In these cases, I do think that some kind of, communication can be especially important as long as the person is actually willing and open to learn. But the trap that I see people fall into is that they think that the other people have to 100% get it in order for them to do something. And they feel like they have to explain themselves to other people for doing recovery-oriented things. Maybe you're out with friends and you know that, hey, me and my coach, we made an agreement that I'm going to go have an ice cream and challenge that fear food. You feel like you need to explain to your friends why suddenly you're actually eating ice cream again. And it's like, you actually don't necessarily need to do that. And people may overestimate just how much other people notice and care about the changes that you're making in terms of your movement, in terms of your food, in terms of bodily changes. Most of the time, people don't really care that much. So even though, yes, it can, for example, be helpful to tell your friends, hey, I have this ice cream challenge that I'm doing. Do you want to join me? Maybe keep me a bit accountable. That can be okay. But you don't necessarily need them to 100% understand neural rewiring and fear foods and psychology in order for you to do that. A lot of times what is behind this desire to explain yourself is a sense of fear, a sense of guilt, a sense of, shame around these changes, and feeling like if other people can affirm it, it will be easier for you to do it. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with leaning a bit on other people in recovery. There's nothing wrong with having allies in your recovery. Maybe you have a friend that is especially helpful and encouraging. Or maybe you have parents that are taking an active role in your recovery. Maybe they're saying, hey, we are preparing dinner tonight. You're going to eat it as a fear food challenge. Let's do this together. I fully support that. I do by no means want to encourage hyper-individualism and just being like, okay, I'm just going to recover without any form of support. But my point is essentially, like what I said in the beginning, other people don't need to be experts in recovery and understand absolutely everything in order to support you in your recovery. You can have a family member or a friend or a partner or whatever it is that may even have a different approach to food, to movement, a different belief system than you, and they can still support you. Because so often what I see is someone will be in recovery and maybe they, for example, maybe they have a dad that is really into diet culture and really into fitness. And they think that in order for them to recover, they have to change their dad's perception and change how their dad eats and how their dad moves and get the parent, to get the dad here to see the light in order for them to recover. So they start, sending out articles or podcast episodes. I'm sure my podcast episodes have probably been sent a few times in this kind of scenario, hoping that if the other person just listens to this and read this, they will change their mind and therefore be a good recovery ally. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are cases where maybe you have someone in your life that is just deep into diet culture and you send some resources and they're kind of reconsidering their stance a bit. That, of course, can happen. But what instead often happens is that it just becomes a little bit of a battlefield where you actually have to almost debate the other person and end up really triggered because they're coming with counter arguments from a diet culture point of view that just ends up really fueling your eating disorder. Imagine, for example, maybe you are in a position where you really need to just go cold turkey with movement because you're struggling with compulsive movement and your body and brain is just not in a place for it. But you have your dad who is training for a marathon and is really set in his own ways and can't quite see why anyone would ever take a break from movement. And instead, it just becomes an argument about the health benefits of movement, and then you just end up feeling really goddamn triggered. I've done an episode in the past, actually, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, so pretty recent episode where I spoke exactly about this, where I spoke about the importance of knowing your own tendencies when it comes to engaging with health advice. The episode is called Online Wellness Culture and the Pathologization of Normal, so do check that out. Essentially, what I talk about there is why when you are hearing about what is healthy, what is not healthy, it's important to know that that advice is usually intended for a mainstream audience, not necessarily people with eating disorders. And I think this is where a lot of people get caught up. And also people with eating disorders can get really caught up in this, where they think that if movement is not healthy for them right now, the people around them can't move and it can't be healthy for them. And that's not necessarily true. It can be that for someone in your life, movement may be the right thing for them to do with their mental and physical health right now, but it doesn't automatically make it the right thing to do for you. And this can create a lot of tension with the people around you because they suddenly feel like they're almost being accused of having an eating disorder for example, engaging in movements. And unfortunately, I also have seen cases where, for example, a family member may have a type of movement, just an example, that they really enjoy doing. It is not disordered, not unhealthy for them in any way, mentally or physically. And they feel like they need to stop doing that movement in order to support the person in their recovery. So maybe your sibling is a swimmer and loves swimming, has so much of their social community in swimming, and has no problems with an eating disorder, is mentally and physically in a good place, yet your sibling feel like in order for you to recover, they have to stop doing that. That is not a healthy dynamic. It creates so much resentment, and it's just not good for anyone involved. But what you can do in situations like these, instead of trying to control the other person in terms of what they eat, how they move, what they think, what kind of belief system they have around these things, instead, you can set boundaries with them in terms of what kind of conversations that you have with them. So maybe you can tell your sibling, hey, you are of course allowed to do your swimming, I can't stop you from that, but maybe don't talk to me about, oh my God, I just had a swim. It was so amazing. I felt such a kick from it, because that probably is not what you need to hear when you are in recovery from compulsive movement, as an example. It's a bit like, for example, if someone is in recovery from alcoholism, it's not that their friends suddenly have to stop drinking and can't go out on the pub, but their friends constantly telling them how good of a time they had on the pub drinking is probably not what they need to hear in that moment. But if the friends were instead told that they can't drink because you have an alcohol problem, that probably would create some resentment, and they may even start to counter-argue, and again, it would be a triggering conversation. So, to make things easier, don't try and control the people around you. Instead, set boundaries with the conversations that are being had. And when I say setting boundaries with the conversations, I do not mean you being militant about what the other person is or isn't allowed to talk about. I do not want you to encourage the people around you to walk on eggshells or to be like, no, this is not a topic that we're allowed to talk about. don't do that. It just makes everything really sour in the relationship. But instead, you can say something along the lines of, hey, I would just really appreciate if you could be a little bit mindful around talking about movement around me, right? Not saying, hey, don't move, but saying, hey, maybe around me, try and be just a little bit mindful of those conversations right now, because I notice that I'm quite sensitive to them. I think people can fall into two extremes here, so I think it's very important to know your own tendencies. Some people may fall into a place where they kind of make the people around them walk on eggshells. They're really strict with what you can and can't talk about, or you may try and control the other people's intake or how they move and try and almost accuse them of having eating disorders and having problems that they don't really have. And overall casting a lot of blame onto other people, like, because you did or said X, Y, Z, I'm not gonna, finish my dinner. This will kill your relationships. It creates so much resentment on both ends because there's a sense of feeling controlled or feeling like you can't really be yourself, a sense of walking on eggshells. It is not healthy. Then again, on the other side of the extreme, we have people who are not communicating their needs at all. People who are never saying that something may be triggering them. They're never really setting any kind of boundaries because they're so scared of making the other people walk on eggshells, right? So they probably will listen to this podcast episode, the beginning of this episode, and be like, see, this is why I shouldn't say anything. This is why I need to take a step back. This is why I should just suffer through it. Neither of those extremes are healthy and productive for you or for the people around you. When you are constantly trying to keep the peace, I want you to ask yourself, whose peace are you keeping? It is essentially you sacrificing your own peace for other people. Yes, there are people who are the other way around, where everything is about them. Everything is about their needs and their inner peace, right? But then there is the other way around, where someone is just completely ignoring their own needs and their own peace. And this especially goes for people pleasers. So people pleasing is an interesting one because I think it's a term that's become a very misunderstood in today's society, where simply caring about other people is being seen as being a people pleaser. That is not the case. Wanting to see other people being happy and overall being an easygoing and agreeable person is not inherently being a people pleaser. People pleasing, at least the way that I define it, is when it comes to a point where it actually ends up harming you. And also potentially harming your relationships, because people pleasing, you may think that it makes the relationships better. That is not necessarily the case. So hear me out here. Personally, I find people pleasers to be quite difficult to be around. In my personal life, of course, it's very different when I work with clients, because I do see people pleasing traits coming up quite a lot. But in my personal life, I sometimes find it very difficult. And the reason for this is that people pleasers immediately put me in a position that I don't want to be in. It puts me in a position where I have to be almost a manager of the friendship, right? The manager of what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, where I also have to constantly try and analyze them and what their needs really are, because I know they're not going to tell me. That to me is exhausting. It puts so much more work on me. Instead, I want to be around people where I trust that they say what they mean and mean what they say. I want to have people around me where if I'm saying, hey, do you want to go grab Chinese food? And they say yes, that means, yes, I want to go grab Chinese food. I don't want to be in a position where I'm with someone and I realize that, oh shit, this was not really what they wanted to do. This is, I can see they're not quite happy. Why didn't they tell me? That irritates me. It generally irritates me a lot. Or people who expect me to read their mind and just know their needs, because I don't. This does not mean that we should never read between the lines, that we should never, also doesn't mean that we should never be easygoing. Occasionally we will all do things that maybe wasn't on the top of our list. Maybe your partner really wanted to go to this museum and you were kind of like, it's not really what I'm super interested in, but my partner is really excited about it, so I'll go with them. People pleasing, on the other hand, would be going on a holiday with a partner and the entire holiday is just revolving around what your partner wants to do. And you secretly ending up resenting your partner because it's all about them. But did you speak up? No. So I understand this can be hard to hear for the people pleasers here, but I am saying this because I hope this may help you to realize that the behavior you're doing is not necessarily making life so much easier for everyone else, especially not people who care about you. There are some people that are really selfish and they love a people pleaser because it means everything can be all about them. But for people who are not like that, they're going to find it a little bit tricky to be around a people pleaser where they have to constantly like try and read the signals, try and think, do they really mean these things, not knowing quite where they have them. And if you are a people pleaser, I want you to think a bit about your behavior. Are you doing this to please people because you want them to just be well and be happy? Or is there a part of you that is doing this behavior because you want them to like you? Essentially, you trying to control the outcome and control their perception of you. Oftentimes this comes, again, like I said, not from a genuine care for other people. Not saying that can't be a part, but it comes from a sense of insecurity. It comes from a sense of low self-worth, of feeling like your needs aren't valuable, aren't really important, and other people's needs are more important. But I want to also ask you, if you feel that way, what is it that makes you so much different from everyone else? What is it that makes you so uniquely flawed? So there is this expression that I've probably said like 10 times on this podcast already, but I like it because it's very blunt and very thought-provoking. And it is that there is a lot of narcissism and self-hatred. And I recently read something around this and I thought it was really good. It was essentially a book that was a conversation between like an old philosopher and a young boy, and they were discussing the feeling of inferiority and in inferiority complex, basically like feeling chronically inferior to other people, and how actually it is like low-key a little bit narcissistic, because you're saying, I am uniquely flawed, I'm so different from other people. And interestingly, what I sometimes see when working with people who have very low self-worth or feel very inferior to other people is that they almost like swing a little bit sometimes. And they'll say that there's a part of them that feel like they must be like unique and amazing and like a celebrity or have some unique talent in order to be worthy. And then immediately they swing to the other extreme where they're like, no, I need to be like the sickest person, the most effed up person, the most complex person. Like, it's like, that's resistance towards just accepting that most of us are pretty average in most of what we do, and that is actually completely okay. I found so much relief in my life when I realized that in like most areas of my life, I'm just completely average. Then there are a few areas of my life where I'm below average and a few areas where I'm above average, and that is completely okay. That's the case for most of us. So find some solitude or find some satisfaction, I guess, in being average and just not being uniquely flawed, not being uniquely amazing or uniquely awful. And what is it about you that makes you so uniquely flawed that you are just not worth anything? Of course, what I'm talking about here is work around self-worth. And this, of course, is complex work. If you are someone who struggles with deep-rooted inferiority, this is a typical thing that you may find that working on in therapy can be very helpful. Also, keep a bit of an eye on the people around you, because sometimes people who are very, very low in self-worth and they feel incredibly inferior, they have a lot of interpersonal relationship problems. They may attract people who are comfortable walking all over them, comfortable being in that manager position that I just mentioned that I personally don't feel comfortable with. Or they may just withdraw from people at all because they feel so scared that if they show them their true selves, other people will run the other direction. Not knowing that you're not uniquely flawed. There's nothing worse or better with you than other people. So yeah, my entire point here is if you're someone who's a people pleaser, whether it's something where you're like, oh crap, this is something I really want to work on, or whether you're someone who maybe take a lot of pride in being a people pleaser and sacrificing yourself for other people and almost being a martyr, I want you to just consider that not everyone actually loves being around people who are doing that behavior. And this can be so hard to hear if you are a people pleaser, if you're trying to get everyone to like you. But it's like if you are a friend of everyone, you are a friend of none, because it's a limit to how much authenticity you can actually keep up if you want everyone to like you. And this is a fear a lot of people have around setting boundaries, where they're saying, well, if I set a boundary, I say no to something or someone, I say, no, actually, I can't do that. Then what would other people do? Will they not like me anymore? And the people who will stop wanting to be around you because you set healthy boundaries, it's the trash taking itself out. I'm not saying you should be militant around setting boundaries. Boundaries should be flexible, but they should be firm as well. And I know that can seem like an oxymoron, but essentially what I'm saying is flexible boundaries means that you may have certain people in your life, for example, that you don't have to set as strict boundaries with them, right? Maybe you have someone based on their track record, there's someone that you can give them the benefit of the doubt quite a few times. But then you have someone else where you actually have to set a bit more of a firmer ground with. That is okay. That is part of, relating with other people. You're going to have a different approach to different people. You may have a friend where simply just communicating a bit, hey, like I feel a little bit uncomfortable around dieting conversations is enough for that friend to be really mindful and not do that. And, they only need a few gentle reminders here and there. But then you may have your uncle who's constantly talking about his keto diet every time there is a family dinner, where you actually have to be a bit more firm and say, hey, if this continues, I'm going to have to leave the room. Remember this thing about boundaries. Boundaries are not controlling, or it's not around controlling what other people can and can't do. It is about saying how you will respond to what they are doing. So a boundary is not telling your uncle that he can't talk about his keto diet. Instead, a boundary is you saying that if he does that, you will do X, Y, Z in response. For example, leaving the room. And again, let's go back to what I said about boundaries can be flexible sometimes as well. You may have a friend where you don't have to set as strict of a boundary, because if they start talking, you know that it's just because they've forgotten immediately. You know that if you just give them a gentle reminder, they'll be like, oh crap, I'm so sorry. So then you don't have to start saying, okay, I'm going to leave the room. Again, you want to adapt the boundaries depending on who you are talking with. So back a bit to what I said in the beginning about how to communicate your needs in recovery. So now we have made it very clear that you don't need other people to 100% understand why you have certain needs in order for you to communicate them. And then in terms of how to communicate them, again, what I said is you're not trying to control other people's behavior. Instead, you are just saying what it is that you're going to do. Of course, giving some guidance around how people can best support you. So for example, telling if you have a friend, for example, that is a heavy dieter, maybe saying like, hey, I would prefer if we didn't talk about that. That is completely okay. There is balance and nuance here. But at the end of the day, people are going to do what people are going to do. And that shouldn't intervene with your recovery and what you need to do in your own journey. So if you have people around you that are genuine allies in your recovery, meaning they support you and they want to do what's best for you, they just don't quite know what that is, I recommend you to help them help you. Be very clear and concise about what it is that they can do different and what it is that you need. Don't just assume that they will get it. Please don't. So many conflicts pop up because someone is like, but my wife, she should just get it. Why doesn't she get it? Or, but my uncle he should know not to say that. And yeah, there are times where people are just being ignorant, or they just like pretending that they don't know. Oh, I didn't know that was a problem. When, again, you have to do a little bit of people reading here, which I understand is easier for some people than others. But overall, if you have allies in your life, recovery allies that are trying to support you, don't assume bad intentions. Because this is often what I see, where people will assume that if someone said the wrong thing, they will assume that it's because they have bad intentions, or they don't believe in your recovery, or there was some kind of hidden signal. So maybe, for example, your friend spoke about their spinning class. Then you, instead of what actually happened, which was that your friend just forgot that this was a potential trigger for you, you start thinking, oh my God, they want to sabotage my recovery. Or, oh my God, maybe this was a hint that I should start exercising, right? It's like your eating disorder starts trying to looking for meaning when there is none, which the eating disorder is really good at doing. If you don't communicate your needs very clearly, it actually makes it a lot harder for the people around you, because they will then try and do the guesswork, right? They're like, okay, we need to figure out what this person needs. And this can create so much confusion, and it also can create a little bit of resentment sometimes. Imagine it for yourself. Maybe you have someone in your life who struggle with a certain thing and you have no idea how to support them. Maybe you're trying to go on the internet, but there's so much confusing advice and you just don't quite get it. Wouldn't you so much prefer if they just told me, hey, this is what helps a lot. This is what you can do to support me. This is what actually is a little bit triggering for me. Whilst this is really helpful. If they just communicated that to you clearly, wouldn't that be such a relief for you? And I think people with eating disorders are often so scared of communicating their needs because they don't want the other people to stress about them, right? It's like that, especially if you're someone where you have a lot of fear of expressing your needs, is that, oh, but I don't want other people to stress about it. Well, other people are probably going to stress about it if you don't tell them what to do, because then they're going to stress about getting it right. Maybe you're going at a dinner to your grandparents and they are super stressed about what is okay to say and what is not okay to say and blah, blah, blah. And should we offer dessert? Should we not offer dessert? If you instead just tell them, that is going to relax them so much. So by trying to not stress them, by not talking about things, you're actually just creating more stress. And again, like I've said a few times now, this is not meant to be like rigid or to set like strict instruction manuals about other people, what they can and can't do and what is okay, what is not okay, or encouraging it to be some mental gymnastics. This is not what I mean at all. I'm talking more about like general guidelines and just practical things. For example, maybe you're going on a holiday with your friend and you're like, hey, just FYI, I'm following a meal plan, so I need to be a little bit mindful of actually getting the snack and packing that with me and taking some breaks and making sure I get all the food in, right? Letting your friends know instead of just putting them up to doing guesswork is going to be so much better for everyone involved. Because the people around you want to help and support you. They don't always understand, and that is actually completely okay. Think about the people that maybe you've had someone around you where you want to support them with what they're going through, but you don't really understand exactly what they're going through. Can't you support them, right? Maybe you have a friend that's going through, I don't know, maybe you have a friend who is in psychosis. Do you need to become a psychiatrist to be a supportive friend? Do you need to understand the exact functions and neurobiology of psychosis to be there for your friend? No. But it probably would be very helpful if your friend said, hey, this is how to best show up for me, right? In short, help people help you. Do that in a flexible way. Do that in a way where you're assuming good intentions from people. And if you have someone where that is just not working out, where you are assuming good intentions, but it actually turns out that they are not on your team, then you have to kind of ask yourself, are these people worth having in my life? If it is someone that's just repeatedly working against your recovery, that is not respecting your boundaries, that is not listening to you, doesn't seem interested at all in actually supporting you, and just ends up repeatedly triggering you, it is okay to take a step back. And this especially goes if you have someone in your life that struggles with food, body movement themselves, or someone who's really deep into diet culture. I understand that can be a really triggering situation, and it is probably, for some people, it's going to come to a point where you have to ask yourself, is this someone that can be around right now? And I know that can sound really brutal, but it is okay to distance yourself if it is someone where you're noticing that their presence in your life is causing you more harm than good. And it's important to understand and respect your role as well. So maybe you have a friend with an eating disorder, for example, and part of you want to go into rescue mode, but you're noticing that by doing so, you actually end up harming your own recovery, and the dynamic between you gets really skewed. Or you want to go into educator mode and save everyone in your life from diet culture. Chances are it's actually not going to help them, nor is it going to help you. I'm just a firm believer that people are on their own journeys and they have to make their own decisions around food, body, and movement. Yes, you can share resources and invite the people around you to learn more. There's nothing wrong with that. But please don't make it so that you can only recover if everyone else is behaving in a certain way, because you can't control other people. Instead, what you can control is how you communicate your needs to other people and how you help them help you. It doesn't mean that they have to be perfect, but please communicate, especially if something is just repeatedly creating a lot of resentment in your relationship with that person. And also, know your tendencies, like I said. Are you someone where you have a tendency maybe to be a little bit too hard on the people around you? Maybe a little bit too suspicious? Maybe like you are really like, you're watching what they're saying and you're trying to control how they are engaging with food or movement? By the way, sometimes people may have that dynamic with one person in their life, but not the other. For example, a very common example I see is someone who has that dynamic with a parent or a partner, but then they have a different dynamic with their friends. Or when thinking about your tendencies, you may realize that you are the opposite. You're someone where you have a very hard time setting boundaries and communicating your needs, and you overall feel very scared of speaking up and telling other people how to best support you. All right, so be aware of your own tendencies, where you tend to lean, and where you tend to lean with which people as well. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you soon in another episode.